Welcome to Tech Bites with Dan Hafner, your gateway to the future of innovation and technology. Dive into the exciting world of software where cutting-edge tech meets creativity. Explore no-code solutions that empower businesses to thrive without traditional barriers. Hear inspiring stories from tech pioneers and industry leaders who are changing the game. Join us on Tech Bites and transform the way you think about technology and business.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the show. My name is Dan Hafner. Got another cool guest for you guys here today. There is a lot of crazy stuff going on online. You probably are aware of all of the, we always hear about the big bad algorithm, or maybe you've been shadow banned, or maybe you are just noticing different things going on that are a little fishy, a little weird. This was a lot more in the shadows, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. It's really coming to the forefront now. So I have a special guest on here. He has a really incredible book out that we're going to talk about. It's exposing all this stuff. This guy was in the belly of the beast for a long time, and now he's out and he's exposing secrets. Dun dun dun. It's going to be really, really fun. I'm super excited to talk to Tim here. I'm going to bring him in just 1 minute. But before I do, as always, thank you all for joining the show. Please like and subscribe to the show. That really, really helps. Share an episode, share the show with someone that you think finds value from this. And if you don't subscribe, you're going to be missing out on a really cool series that we're about halfway through now, called the No Code Advantage, specifically for any of you who are entrepreneurs, small business owners, looking to build software, kind of prohibited by the technical barriers and or the cost barriers. No Code is a very, very cool tool. That is what I do. That's everything that I've specialized in for the past 5 years. So I'm putting together this 10-episode series. You can check it out here in the Tech Bites podcast. I think we're on like episode 3 or 4 right now. It's super valuable. Been getting really, really good feedback. So make sure you subscribe to the show so you can get alerts when these new episodes are released. We're putting this all together. There's a lot of free resources to go along with those episodes as well for you guys. So be sure to check those out. Everyone has been really, really liking them so far. So that's my plug for the show, and we're going to bring in Tim O'Hearn. He is, I got to give him a little bit of an intro first. I'll let him introduce himself. Welcome to the show, Tim. How are you, sir?
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me on. It's all good today. I just launched the paperback version of my book this morning. Was finally released by Amazon. But I think the reason that I'm really here today on Tech Bites is to talk about my book, Framed, A Villain's Perspective on Social Media, and the events leading up to it. As you said, villainy and bad guy activity on social media has been prevalent since the very, very early days. And my belief is that nobody's really told the story yet. So I'm taking a lot of my firsthand experience starting in 2016 and 2017 through the early 2020s and wrapping it up in this 2025 title that is in many ways still relevant to today.
It's like a tell-all book. I love it. I'm here for it. It's going to be so cool. So I've not read the book, I will preface that, but it's called Framed. And this is interesting because let's go back, because you were a software developer in these big tech companies, social media companies, things like that, right?
Yeah, so the unique perspective is that I was never an insider within big tech, but what I did was I more or less exploited and reverse engineered a lot of what was going on in order to run these services that both scraping systems as well as like things that got people more followers in a way that violated the terms and conditions. So that was one aspect. And then much later, I actually worked at a startup that was doing all of the things that we now criticize big tech for. So why, does the algorithm know me so well? Why are these push notifications so disruptive? I then much later actually went on to build some of those addictive, persuasive technology systems at a much smaller startup.
Interesting. Okay. My curiosity is piqued. So this is interesting because my first question out of the gate, I wasn't planning on asking this, but since you said that, I'm very interested, because what would you say is like one thing that if we all knew about this would shock us all, that we would just be like, wait a second, like what now? Can you repeat that? Like what's the biggest, I guess what's the biggest misconception, biggest lie that we the public don't know about these things?
Yeah, I think I would stop short of calling it a lie, but I would say the biggest issue or thing that's right below the surface that maybe isn't well analyzed outside of like the academic context is definitely the effect of algorithms on emotions. Is how easily a newsfeed can be co-opted and I guess in a way augmented to change how somebody feels. Now, there's the good aspect of that, which is if like emotions. In my book, I talk about Plešik's wheel of emotions, and it has all these different things, which is basically like happy, sad, angry, and so on. And of course, if you're happy or if you're distracted, then that's a positive thing. But just as easily as content can be filtered to make you feel a good way, it could also be filtered to make you feel a bad way. And why would they do that? Perhaps it is a propaganda campaign, or perhaps it does make you, it increases your bond with that platform, and it makes you more engaged or more reactive to the content you're seeing. So I think the ability for an algorithm to play with your emotions and how easily it could actually be done is one of the most pressing issues today.
Wow, that's crazy. That reminds me of, I think we're all pretty, I mean, I've been very familiar with this effect, like the social media depressive effect of,
Sure.
like, what's it called? There's a term for it. It's like you only see the highlight reel of everyone's life, right? And so that can actually, it's almost like it's designed to say, hey, show me things that are uplifting of people having, success in their life or having fun or traveling or doing this or doing that. And as someone, you can see that, and that can almost have the opposite effect. Like, I think this is a very common thing. You might know this term a little bit better than me, but I mean, that's the first thing that my mind goes to is this. It can almost be designed to make you feel a little bit anxious and depressed about your own life because you're like, oh, I don't have a Lambo. I'm not traveling to Paris every 3 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a huge problem, and it's something that a lot of services like mine. So I worked at a company, or I designed all the algorithms for a company that I codenamed Shark Social. So I haven't released the actual name of the company I worked at, but it's no longer it's no longer in operation. It's been closed since 2022. But what we noticed was exactly what you kind of what you identify here, which is even less regarding the content, but even just attributed to follower numbers. So somebody would come to us and say, okay, I have 1,000 followers. How do I get to 10K? Because I'm better than this person, or I'm better than that person, or like my business is higher quality. So a lot of people stopped even looking at the content and started looking at social metrics. And what I did in my book, especially in the early internet history portion of it, was I actually looked back to MySpace, and I found what I believed were some of the origins of this activity, which was what is now an obsession, with social media metrics. So yeah, it's a problem, and I think it's no different from why somebody would, I don't know, like, why does the cosmetics industry make so much money, right? It's because people want to like improve themselves. They want to improve their outward appearance. We essentially sold this cosmetics like makeup for your profile and your follower numbers. And people bought it for basically the same reasons, expecting some end goal, like maybe, oh, they equated a follower number with some measure of success. But you and I both know that that's not actually how it works. Those numbers are just numbers, or like a carefully curated feed is just a carefully curated feed. It's really difficult to see those things and to have them translate to real life.
Wow, very, very interesting. So if you guys, just as a quick reminder, we're talking about his book, Framed, A Villain's Perspective on Social Media. This is really, really, really interesting. You guys can check it out. The link's in the show notes for you. So is everything that we see fake? Like, is everything on social media fake then? Like, is there just so many filters? Is there so much, AI generated things, or at least, is there going to be, that it's just like, how do we differentiate this stuff?
Yeah, one thing I admit, towards the conclusion of my book is that even myself, I think of myself as something of an expert. I do struggle now to differentiate between like ChatGPT, like AI generated stuff, and things that are natural or organic.
Yeah.
And why I think this book comes at an interesting time is that most of it, over 100,000 words, were pretty much written before ChatGPT was really a thing. Like at least 50,000 words were like ready to go, but I wrote this book over many years. But a lot of these concepts, we then saw a meaningful change. So one of the two-part chapters, one of the more technical chapters is called The Puppeteer. So we have The Puppeteer Part 1 and The Puppeteer Part 2 in my book. And these two aspects are really, really important because you have what are the platforms themselves doing that perhaps creates this like fake state, like this dead internet theory, as it's called. And then also, what could an experienced rogue software engineer, such as me, what could I do to further that theory or further decrease the user experience for a human on a platform? And there's definitely a natural conflict here because platforms in some way benefit from bots in that when they report their usage numbers to investors, of course they would like to report 10% more users knowing that they're bots. And this has been controversial. Elon talked about it a lot when he was buying Twitter, and it was a huge problem on Twitter. But a lot of people don't know that Twitter actually permitted bots under certain use cases, just like Reddit did or still kind of does. I think the other issue is that now, especially with ChatGPT, if you even want to go to Reddit, for example, and you want to farm karma, you could create a bot that just scrapes, it looks at what the most recent thread is, it comes up with this plausible, kind of positive, kind of like authoritative response, well written at least, from ChatGPT, and it posts it. And if you have enough of that, maybe you or I could recognize like real from fake because we've been on the internet a long time. But if you're a 12-year-old kid who doesn't have that much experience differentiating between real or fake, this creates this like fantasy state where they really don't know. And they get to the point where just because somebody influential has told them what ChatGPT is, they then start looking at certain news sources or certain individuals and thinking, oh, that person's fake or that person's computer generated, when in actuality they're real. So you have both things. You have people who should know better, who don't, and then you have people who definitely shouldn't know better, like who are naive, and nobody's helping them make the distinction.
Wow. That's crazy. I think I talked about that before on the show a little bit, like kind of going into Reddit and people who can run automations, like you said with ChatGPT on that.
Yeah.
And that is that is so terrifying on multiple levels. Because I remember watching this video. I think I talked about this before of somebody who was showing like the early ChatGPT operator version. He was like, that was his thing. He said, in 10 years, nothing on social media is going to be real. Because I can say, hey, go find these posts and post this authoritative content as a response with a link to my website or a link to my calendar or whatever like that. And I mean, where does that leave the world of social media in the next 5 to 10 years? Where does that leave it in 20 years? Like, is this going to be something that's solely a propaganda machine? Is it solely a bot world? Is there room for, genuine, real connection with people still? Like, where does this go? What's the end game here?
Yeah, I think the term is probably like technological like singularity, I think, which is the point at which everything just reaches, it's just basically run by machines. Everything is done by machines, and there's really no way for a human or even a band of humans to affect things. I think what you're getting at is that the quality, even though ChatGPT can seem useful at first, over time it erodes the quality of everything because it's actually derivative. It doesn't think for itself. So a good example I would give is that when I was researching for my book, I was researching some very, very niche topics from early MySpace, for example. And one of these practices on MySpace was called MySpace whoring. And it was a practice where you would enter into an arrangement with someone to promote each other to your friends, and just in order to get more friends. There was no sexual connotation or whatever, but it was just a dirty word that like 14 or 15-year-olds thought was cool and edgy to use. I asked about this on Reddit saying, hey, I have some really good original research here, but I need pictures. Do you have those MySpace era pictures? And so on and so forth. And one of the responses I got was actually from a pure ChatGPT like powered bot on Reddit. And it starts with a plausible response and then it goes completely off the rails. And how is that? It's because I was referring to something from so long ago that is so poorly documented that it actually hadn't been trained on that concept at all. And I pointed it out to the mods and they agreed with me. And that's an example that I find, or that anyone could find in the book. But when we think about drawing back the curtain and going back a couple years, we've always had content recycling. Like a huge thing on Reddit or even Dig, if you remember that, or like Hacker News, is someone would say like, oh, this is a repost. Because somebody took a concept that did really well a month earlier, 6 months earlier, even the year before, and they're like, I've seen this before. And somebody saying repost was like an authoritative beatdown of just saying, nope, we've already seen that, move on. But now there's so many people on Reddit, probably 2 orders of magnitude more people than what I remember, that nobody even uses the term repost anymore. Like no, that's basically a lost term. Yeah. And just as much as it's a lost term, you can easily create a bot that says what were the top posts last month. And one thing I address in the book is like, why do we see on especially major subreddits like Ask Reddit, like why is it like, oh, what happened to the loner kid from high school? Why does that come up every month? Or like, what's one family secret that shouldn't have been revealed? Why does that come up every month? Because it gets karma and it helps these people further their goals, even though they might not be purely profit oriented. So to answer your question, we've always had this like content recycling. We've always had what was called content spinning. But with Gen AI and with these more automated practices, there's a huge problem. And the only way to solve the problem is through what I term continuous verification. So we know what verification is. You take a picture of your face, you maybe submit your ID, your social security number, and it helps your persona on a website have more clout and more trust. But I believe that we should be taking it a step further where you don't just do it once, you actually do it every time you log in. And if it really matters, you have to re-authenticate every 15 minutes. And the example I give is like, okay, on Facebook, that sounds ridiculous, but how would you react if you knew that there are Uber drivers right now in New York City who are driving under somebody else's Uber account? Well, we could solve that if we had So we could solve that if we had continuous verification, but that's what most people forget. Somebody could just take somebody else's phone, take their car, even use a different car. Like I've gotten picked up in Ubers that weren't even the same car, and they're like, yeah, no, don't worry. And they show me the thing on their phone. So if you have black markets for essentially identities, the only way we're going to be able to stop that and actually stop the bots is by using continuous verification. Unfortunately, it's prohibitively expensive.
Yeah, I'm sure. Wow. Very, very interesting. So, all right, let's talk about. I want to get to this topic of shadow banning as well, because I think that this is a very interesting, thing that's going on. You talk about it in the book. It's very, like I guess TikTok is kind of like one of the big hot topics of the world right now. Is it going to go away? Is it not? It was. Now it's back. Now it's all this stuff. Right? It's up in the air. At the time of recording this, at least it's up in the air.
Yeah.
So. And one thing I've heard is that there is different algorithms for it here than in China. There's actually, like you said, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, there's a certain algorithm that pushes, certain kinds of content that's more, call it less academic, more addictive, more just sexual in nature, whatever, towards children of America. Whereas in China, it's really targeting like, here's what success is, here's math, here's like things that are actually building up the right kinds of habits in their mind. Mm-hmm. Is that true, one? And two, what's the ethical ramifications of something like that?
Yeah, that was a really popular news story. I think that we saw spread throughout 2024, and we would say that probably led to some of the action that was taken against TikTok. Yeah. The second chapter in my book is titled "They Shut Down TikTok, Now What?" And it kind of recounts the events of the weekend of, I think, January 25th of 2025, where it actually was shut down. So we think about what are the problems levied, or what are the complaints levied on ByteDance on TikTok. And there's a lot there. Like some people would say, oh, well, your data is not secure. It's kind of this surveillance system. And then there's also what you said, which is that you're being manipulated in the algorithm. And if we believe that TikTok is perhaps controlled by an adversary to the United States, could it be used to inflict perhaps like pain or something amongst or discord in the U.S. populace, whereas in other countries it could actually be used as a really useful learning tool for educational content. So does that exist? I don't know. I've never changed my VPN to a different country to check. But in my book, I make the point that to avoid the ban, you certainly could have. You could just use a VPN and you could have logged into Canada, and TikTok would have always worked for you. But the topic of how this relates to shadow banning is really important because also with that, if they're posting, if somebody somewhere is trying to control a message, then also they're likely trying to suppress certain people who might be on the opposite side of that message. Mm-hmm. And that's really this allegation of shadow banning. The term has been recognized by multiple platforms. So for example, Facebook released an official statement. A lot of people don't know this. There's an official statement on their blog of like answering like, do we shadow ban? And the awkward part is that they never answer the question. And shadow banning is so useful because if you actually get a ban, which I've literally suffered thousands of bans. I've even been banned when trying to promote my book because it uses so many spammy keywords. So I'm currently like going through appeals processes as an advertiser because I've been banned from platforms you would never expect to take that action. So the thing is that with a shadow ban, you don't know it's happening. You don't know you've been suppressed. You don't know that your reach is minified. So it doesn't mean you can't use the platform. It's basically going to your cousin's house when you're like 10 years old and your cousin's 15. They give you a controller. You think you're playing split screen multiplayer, but you're not playing at all. You have the controller. You can still see what's on the screen, but you have no control whatsoever. And for them, for the platform owners, they could easily create keywords or manually designate people who get less reach, which means I guess the opposite of that is a concept I suggest called shadow boosting, which is that if they don't want dissenting voices, maybe they really, really boost up the messages that they want, or the distractions in the like conspiracy theory, the distractions, the things that get people talking about totally different topics. Just as easily as they can suppress voices, they can also boost them. I term that shadow boosting, and I think I'm the first person to use that term.
I was going to say I've never heard that term. That's very, very interesting. So, I mean, how does one take advantage of that? Is there certain trends to look for? Is there certain promoted content that you can pick up on? Like, how does one pick up on what's being shadow boosted?
It's really, really difficult. And what I say is it's not about being an expert anymore. It's either about being an insider or being an outsider like me who essentially controlled a bot farm of thousands of accounts. Because it's only through this like massive experimentation that you could start to tease out what is happening and what isn't happening. Now, in some cases where I would say you're just talking about this like filtration that's biased, you could experiment on your own. But when you're saying, well, my post was only shown to 10 people, how do you know it was supposed to be shown to 100? It's really, really tough to set up those experiments, and it requires a load of compute power, and it also means you have to create a ton of fake accounts to run these experiments. But when you create a fake account, its natural reach is going to be so little anyway that you can't test what's going to happen to Dan or what's going to happen to Tim because it's not apples to apples. So it's in this position where it basically requires an internal whistleblower. It requires very, very like rigorous government like overview and like infiltration to a system, which I don't think is appropriate, or it requires a very, very dedicated team of rogue engineers to even get close to it. There are some services online where you can say, it's basically like amishadowbanned.com, where you can kind of get a feeling for like, oh, is this being shown to like test accounts? But they can never approximate the whole span of like what it means to be on the losing side of an algorithm. In some manual cases, just the one manual case I give in the book is Facebook has a really, really useful search feature, which you can use to search for, posts, groups, your history, right? Like most of us in my generation, we've been on Facebook for 15 years or longer. So I knew that I had done a live stream back when Donald Trump was elected the first time. And I cover it in the book, but I kind of joke like, oh, I thought I was an influencer. I had a couple hundred people watching the live stream, and I just titled it like the Trump riot. That was just the title. I never watched it again. It was just an hour-long rambling video where I was in the midst of a protest in Chicago. And one thing I found really interesting when I did the research for this chapter is that when I searched for Trump riot, the video didn't appear in my history. When I searched for riot, it did. That would indicate that the word Trump was specifically blocked from my search history. It made it much more difficult for me to find content that included the word Trump, whether it was positive or negative. And what I say is like, regardless of political stuff, the fact of the matter is the word riot is much more negative and potentially chaotic and destructive than the word Trump. So the fact that I could search for the word riot, but I couldn't search for the word Trump, and I provide photographic evidence of this in the book, is pretty crazy. So there's minor stuff like that you or I could catch, but in the larger scheme of a shadow ban, we're pretty much helpless.
Yeah, I hate to hear that last piece. What you said, we're pretty much helpless, because I like to provide actionable tips. I like to be like, hey, well, so what can we do from here? But before I get into that question, it just as a comment on what you just said, that's very interesting. So, I mean, that kind of seems like you said, it's almost something that you stumble upon. It's almost something that you're just like, wait a second, that doesn't add up. Like that doesn't, and I think that's just from my perspective of doing zero research, just living a normal life. I think that's where people started to realize that this stuff was happening, because we're all relatively smart of like, well, wait a second, 2 + 2 should not equal 5. Like, wait, what's going on here? Like, and then yeah. So I'll leave it there, because I don't, like you said, I don't want to like make a political discussion about things, but. Yeah, going back to that. So like what can we do? What can, this is a show for SaaS people and technologists and startups and people trying to take advantage of this stuff in marketing world, et cetera. What can we do? Like what are some things that you recommend, either in the book or just, off the top of your head here, to move forward and to get reach, to get, because I have a lot of people that come to me, like a couple clients are like really terrified. They built their business on top of TikTok. Like they have built their business, and meaning by built their business, meaning that that's where most of their leads and their sales come from. And they've recognized when they get shadow banned, and they, like that's a big deal of like, hey, TikTok goes away, like I'm going to lose a huge revenue stream of my business, right? So yeah. So just what can we do? What can we do about this?
Sure, and it's always awful when it happens. I've been, people reached out to me even when I was writing the book saying, oh, I think I'm shadow banned. Oh, I just got, banned or just restricted on this platform. And that's a huge, a huge business segment for me. At that point, you realize that you have no rights whatsoever in terms of your ownership of most of the content. Now, with the new privacy regulations, you can at least download things like related to what you've posted. But when it comes to running a business, what's most important is probably your followers, and whether that's your subscribers, your followers, your friends, your fans, whatever it's called. What a lot of people have realized, from the smallest creators to the mega popular, the household names, is that you need to go to a platform where you own something. And for a lot of people, it comes back to this classic of email newsletter marketing. Because when you own somebody's email address, meaning they've given you permission to email them, that's probably the most valuable currency that you could have on the internet today. It's not followers, it's not views, all that can go away, and it's very difficult to transfer a follower on one platform to another, as you know. So really what I found, even in promoting the book, is like, yeah, that's nice. Like, I made a post on Reddit and I got 50,000 views just in the last 3 days. That's the most I've ever gotten on Reddit by a long shot. But what would mean the most to me is not like, doing that little Reddit segment and getting a couple followers on Reddit. It would be converting those people to a mailing list, because that's where it's agnostic. You can input it to any one of these, like Beehive or whatever, like the new age platform is, and then that's how you can continue doing your sales, and wherever you're actually posting content, that's secondary. And I think it's going to be this huge shift. A lot of people are already doing it. I think the popularity of there's definitely a new age of newsletter marketing, and a lot of it is because people were scared off from Twitter, and they're like, let me take this into my own hands, and it also gives me an avenue for monetization as well. So I think all of this goes to newsletters, and you're playing a very dangerous game if you're focusing just on one platform. Perhaps with the exception of YouTube, I don't think there's a good replacement for like long form video yet.
Interesting. Very interesting. Could always build your own software, like I tell people all the time too.
Yeah.
That's always a possibility. So
Sure.
I'll plug that one shamelessly. Very, very cool. So, all right. So the book, where can we get it? What does it cost? Like, you got any kind of cool deals or any kind of cool things we can offer to listeners here at all?
Absolutely, Dan. So I'm an insider, and I want to share it with other insiders. I want to share it with people who have been subscribed to my mailing list, for the last 8 years. I want to share it to the earliest people who are, perhaps perusing it, checking it out before there's this mainstream social proof, before we get the New York Times features and things of that nature. So the deal I'm offering right now is you can get this ebook for 99 cents. That's the absolute low. That's the lowest it could go without having to go through a totally different publishing process. Wow. And also today, I published the paperback at 3 a.m. It was approved by Amazon, so the paperback's out for $14.99. And I'm going to be honest, this is a thick book. This is over 400 pages. Every single chapter is original content. It's filled with citations. It's filled with original research. And I think the angle I approached it from was not to make a quick buck from people interested in social media. It's to preserve history and to kind of provide a framework for understanding everything going forward. So you can check it out on Amazon, and I think it's the best deal. I think it's one of the top sellers as of the last week. So I'm proud of that, and I'm proud to share it with more people.
Should be proud of that. That's awesome, man. Congrats. Very
Thank
cool.
you.
So for you guys listening, want to check this out, dive deeper into this conversation, go ahead, get the book. It's in the show notes here. It's called Framed. And it is, I cannot vouch for it. I've not read it, but I'm going to get my hands on that for sure. This is a very, very interesting conversation, very timely, very relevant. So thank you for coming on the show, sharing all this with us. This was very, very insightful. A lot of interesting things to think about.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I feel like we could probably talk for 2 more hours about this, but everything here and the way you guided it has been, I think, really, really useful for the listeners. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, could definitely ask a lot more questions, but we're going to cut it off there. So you guys go get the book, check it out. Let's make this a New York Times bestseller. This kind of information should be out there. Like, this should be, this is really something I think. I always have respect for someone who can take these concepts that we're all kind of experiencing, we're all seeing, but then distill it down into like a book form, in word, in language format that is clear and makes sense and is like, oh, interesting. So kudos to you. Congratulations on the book, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it does.
Thanks, Dan.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, that was Tim O'Hearn. Hope you got some value from this. I loved having him on. It was really, really fun. So go check out his book. Go get it for yourself. That's a really good deal for 99 cents for the ebook. That probably won't be around forever. I know a lot of books are kind of like that. They kind of, it's a promotional thing up front. So be sure to check that out, guys. That'll be really, really cool. And that is all for this episode. Again, be sure to subscribe to the show. Thank you very much for joining. Check out the No Code Advantage here inside of Tech Bytes as well, so you can get updates on that. And go check out Framed. Thank you so much, Tim. Appreciate you. And we'll talk to you all next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Tech Bytes, your go-to show for software business and technology. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated with our latest episodes, insights, and stories. Hungry for more? Dive deeper into the world of no-code by visiting dapanacode.com. Your journey to building amazing software without coding skills starts there. Connect with like-minded creators and unlock a world of resources tailored just for you. Subscribe now. Explore Dapper No Code and let's innovate together.